Someone told me that Ron Howard got hurt. Ron Howard is the Hollywood success story that generations of Americans have looked up to. The child actor who made a smooth move to respected director, avoiding the problems that killed so many young stars while building one of the best careers in the business. Howard's story, from Opie Taylor to Richie Cunningham to Oscar-winning director, seems to be the American dream come true. Extraordinary success came from talent, hard work, and morality. But behind the director's well-kept public image as a friendly guy who wears a baseball cap is a more complicated truth that Howard has only lately started to talk about in public. The man who made Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, and Parenthood has also been through deep personal crisis, failures that put his career at risk, and painful self-doubt, which is very different from his image as Hollywood's most reliable hitmaker. A longtime co-worker who has worked on many Howard projects said, "People think they know Ron because he's been in their living room since he was 6 years old. But Ron has a depth and struggles that would surprise most people. He's kept up this image of being a complete professional who knows everything, but the truth is much more human and difficult." Howard has recently opened up about these secret parts of his life in interviews and in his autobiography. He talks about family problems, setbacks in his career, and times of deep personal regret that changed his life and work in ways that the public never saw. According to these new details, the man in question has not been an unstoppable success story. Instead, he has been through the same tough decisions, painful mistakes, and emotional losses as everyone else, despite his many professional successes. A professional producer who has worked with Howard for decades said that Ron's job is to tell other people's stories. It's amazing how long he was able to keep his own story, with all of its problems and inconsistencies, kept secret. It was easy to use the image of the happy-go-lucky director with a perfect life, but it never showed the real man or his difficulties. Today, we're going to look at 5 important events in Ron Howard's life that show us who he really is. There were times of crisis, sorrow, and change that shaped his journey much more deeply than the awards and box office hits that are his public legacy. Behind Ron Howard's steady rise from child actor to Oscar-winning director is a more complicated personal journey full of hard choices, setbacks at work, and private problems that most people don't know about. Some of the most interesting things about these discoveries are that they go against the story of Howard's easy success that has been told for decades. The man who seemed to go from playing to directing to TV to movies without a hitch. From commercial entertainment to artistic achievement, film has been through the same difficult issues of balancing work and family life, health problems, and job setbacks as everyone else, albeit on a bigger stage. Howard's willingness to finally talk about these difficult parts of his career paints a fuller picture of a filmmaker whose own life experiences have had a big impact on his work. It shows the real person behind the famous baseball cap and friendly personality that have become his trademarks. "When I was 6 years old, I learned cursive writing so that I could sign things." Because of his drive, he made a choice in 1991 that he deeply regrets. When it came to directing, 1991 was a turning point for Ron Howard. After showing his comedic skills in movies like Splash and Parenthood, and his dramatic skills in Cocoon and Backdraft, he was ready to make his biggest movie yet, Far and Away, a huge historical epic starring Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. The shooting would take place over 6 months in Ireland and Montana. It would be Howard's most difficult logistically, but it would also be a big step toward proving that he is a versatile filmmaker. This job chance was especially hard because it came up at a bad time. Cheryl, Howard's wife, had just given birth to their 4th child, a girl named Jocelyn. He missed important months of his youngest daughter's early growth because he had to work on Far and Away. Howard made this choice in order to become a director. Rebecca Santos, an entertainment journalist who has written about Howard's work for decades, said that he was away for 6 months to film Far and Away. He was at a turning point in his career, and the movie offered him a big pay raise and the chance to work with Hollywood's biggest star at the time. He didn't think he could say no because he wanted to keep getting better as a director. Howard handled the breakup with the usual thoroughness, setting up regular phone calls and times for his family to visit the set when they could. But as the production went on, with delays caused by bad weather, problems with logistics, and the underlying difficulties of making period films, the personal cost of his absence became clearer. Santos went on, missed his daughter's baby years. "When you're in charge of a movie that big, you're not just not there. You're mentally and emotionally occupied all the time." He couldn't fully participate even when he went home for a short time or when his family came to set. There were hundreds of people and millions of dollars riding on his choices for a huge production. Howard finally got home after finishing the movie, but the effects of his long absence hit him with a force he wasn't expecting. He later said that when he got home, his family had gotten used to life without him. His baby daughter, in particular, didn't recognize her father and treated him like he wasn't there. He came home to a changed family and realized what his job had cost him, said Dr. James Peterson, a psychologist who studies how successful professionals deal with work-life balance issues. This happens a lot to parents whose jobs require them to move a lot. But it can be especially upsetting when it's a baby who grows and changes so quickly in the first few months. If you miss 6 months of an infant's life, you miss important growth milestones and chances to bond with them. In line with, Howard himself said in recent talks that this homecoming was a very big wake-up call. At that very moment, the vague idea of work-life balance became painfully real. The fact that his daughter wasn't recognized for his work made him face the fact that his personal successes had costs that he couldn't just avoid with good intentions and careful planning. A close co-worker said that event followed him around for decades. Ron really cares about his family. His movies, which often show complex family relationships, make that clear. Realizing that he had actually chosen to move up in his job over being with his daughter in her early months caused him some cognitive dissonance. He had always thought of himself as a family man, but what he did here showed that he wasn't. Howard's approach to future projects changed because of this experience. It affected his choices about which movies to direct and how to set up operations. He kept working steadily through the 1990s and beyond, but he became smarter about his schedule, more willing to fight for production schedules that worked with his family, and more aware of how important it was to stay involved in his kids' lives, even though directing was his full-time job. As Santos put it, he started bringing his kids into his work life on purpose after Far and Away. Reed, his son, would go to film sets and finally become interested in making movies himself. His daughter, Bryce Dallas Howard, has talked about how, when she was young, her father would include her in some parts of his work. He seemed to understand that work would take him away from his family sometimes, so he tried to include them in his work as much as possible. With this integration in the years that followed, Howard's focus on family and film became something of a trademark. His wife Cheryl visited almost every set, and his kids were often involved in different parts of his productions. What began as a reaction to a painful realization turned into a unique way for him to balance his family responsibilities with the demands of a successful directing career. Howard's experience with Far and Away was ironic because the movie, which was such a big risk for his career and a sacrifice for him personally, didn't do well at the box office or with critics. After all the missed milestones and bedtimes, Howard felt even worse about his decision to work so hard on a project that didn't help his career in the way he had hoped, which added to his sense of regret. He couldn't get over that moment for decades. This short sentence shows how Howard's seemingly simple career choice changed his life in a way that will last a lifetime. Realizing that his desire to advance in his career had cost him. Personal experiences that can't be replaced left a wound that didn't fully heal over time. A constant reminder of the costs that come with trying to be the best at a difficult job while also being there for the people who matter the most. Yeah, every once in a while, but I deny it. It wasn't me. I said he didn't have a pretty good batting average and didn't share the secret family crisis with his brother Clint. Ron Howard's rise from child actor to acclaimed director is one of Hollywood's great success stories. But his younger brother Clint had a much more difficult journey, one that caused serious family problems that most people didn't see. Even though both brothers started out as child actors, their different fortunes made things more complicated and led to a family crisis in the early 1990s. Clint. Thomas Henderson, an entertainment reporter who has written about the Howard family for decades and said that she became addicted in the 1980s, when Ron was directing hit movies and building his production company. Clint was having problems with drugs that were taking over his everything. Their careers, which started at the same time, went in very different directions, which was a painful contrast that affected the whole family. Clint Howard made a name for himself as a character actor by appearing in many movies and TV shows, including many of his brother's productions. But behind his steady job were addiction problems that got worse over time and by the late 1980s were putting his health and career at risk. According to people close to the family, Ron was in the tough spot of seeing his brother's condition get worse while not being able to do much to help. Ron was focused and determined, which helped him do well as a director. When it came to his brother's addiction, it was frustrating because no amount of planning or hard work could fix the problem. In 1990, Ron gave him a choice. Henderson said, "Rehab or lose him." This wasn't just a matter of business. He did everything he could to save his brother's life. At that point, Clint's addiction had reached a level that could have killed him, and normal ways of showing worry had not worked. For both boys, the ultimatum was a turning point. It was the start of Clint's recovery that would finally lead to his sobriety. For Ron, it made him face the helplessness and guilt that had been building up over the years as he watched his brother battle. Guilt stayed. A counselor who specializes in family relationships, Dr. Lisa Montgomery, said that Ron admitted that Clint felt left out because of his own success. This actually happens a lot in families where siblings have very different amounts of success. Comparisons happen easily, even when no one is trying to make them, and they make people on both sides feel complicated emotions. During talks many years later, Ron admitted that his success cast a long shadow over his brother, leading to comparisons that may have made Clint's problems worse. Ron never bragged about his success or tried to draw attention to the difference between his and his brother's jobs, but the fact that Ron was famous in Hollywood made things hard for his brother. This is the classic case of survivor's guilt, Montgomery said. Even though Ron hadn't done anything wrong by succeeding, he felt bad about how it might have made his brother feel. This made him feel a lot of difficult emotions, which he mostly kept to himself while keeping up the public image of the friendly, easygoing director. The most important thing about this family problem for understanding Ron Howard is how it goes against the public view of his easygoing life and rise to fame. People saw Howard easily go from being a child star to an acclaimed filmmaker, but behind closed doors, he was dealing with a painful family situation that tested his ability to solve problems and his belief in himself as someone who could get through anything with persistence and hard work. Film critic Michael Barnes said, "When you look at Ron's films from this time period to later on, you can see how these events shaped his stories." Mom and Dad and A Beautiful Mind are two movies that show a lot of understanding for family problems and mental health issues. Their depth of understanding comes from having lived through things themselves, not from reading about them in school. At some point, the relationship between the brothers got better as Clint stayed sober and kept working as an actor, often playing small but memorable parts in Ron's movies. But family members say Ron will never forget what happened. It made him more aware of how weak people are and how little control we have over other people's choices. Guilt stayed. Ron said that Clint felt left out because of his own success. The emotional depth that lay beneath Ron Howard's carefully crafted public image is summed up in this simple sentence. The acknowledgement that his own extraordinary cast shadows as well as light, affecting those closest to him in ways that were not meant and that no amount of good intentions could stop. It's not true that all of those were difficult fires and backdrafts. There was one that was a physical breakdown, when his body fell apart on Apollo 13. Ron Howard started working on Apollo 13 in 1995. It would become one of his most acclaimed movies. Apollo 13 is based on the true story of the nearly impossible 1970 journey to the moon that showed how smart and brave people can be. Howard had to come up with new ways to make the zero-gravity effects realistic and show how complicated spacecraft and mission control really work. This was his most technically difficult job to date. Howard did his usual thorough work on the project. He learned a lot about NASA history and space technology and worked closely with former pilots and mission controllers to make sure the information was correct. What started out as careful planning turned into. Howard became obsessed with making sure every detail was perfect, which made him push himself past his physical limits. A member of the production team said that Ron passed out on set after 90 days of 18-hour shoots in a row. It wasn't just being tired. After months of running on adrenaline, little sleep, and pure drive, his body just gave out. He was telling them what to do 1 minute, and then he fell to the floor and couldn't get up. The collapse happened in the last few weeks of a shooting plan that was already very long. Several people who knew what was going on say that Howard had been ignoring more and more serious warning signs, such as feeling dizzy, tired, and unable to focus, because he was determined to finish the movie on time and to his high standards. It was finally too much for me to keep trying to be perfect. Dr. Robert Jenkins, an expert on occupational health problems in high-stress jobs, told him what was going on. Making movies, especially as a director, is a lot of work that can be stressful. There is a lot of financial pressure, artistic challenges, management duties, and often physical demands, like not getting enough sleep and having to work around strange schedules. The body can make up for it for a while, but at some point, something has to give. Howard's collapse was so bad that work had to stop on a big studio movie for the first time ever. The doctors who checked him out said he was extremely tired and dehydrated, and they told him that not taking a break could have worse effects on his health. A member of the team said that they had to stop making things for 36 hours. It's a field where time is worth millions of dollars. This was really cool.